Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Former Tampa Bay Buccaneer Antonio Brown now says mental illness was absolutely not to blame for his storming off the field. He's even threatening to sue the team for attributing it to mental health. So let's take him at his word, which would seem to mean that he's just a really bad guy. When will the sports media establishment stop feeling sorry for him? That is coming up. But first, Justice Stephen Breyer's retirement from the Supreme Court has already set off tons of speculation in Washington and beyond about who will fill his seat. By the way, if you're wondering why I've got these things in my ear, it's because we've been having some technical problems, and we're going to give it a shot. A campaign pledge from President Biden significantly narrows now the potential pool of candidates and, in my mind, threatens to undermine the eventual nominee.
I committed that if I'm elected president and have an opportunity to appoint someone to the courts, I'll appoint the first black woman to the courts. It's required that they have representation now. It's long overdue.
So now he has to nominate a black woman or feel the wrath of progressives across the country. Now, there are many highly qualified black women based on any objective criteria. But when he does nominate a black woman, she will inevitably be viewed by many as the pick he made amongst black women, thereby minimizing the achievements of whoever he selects. And indeed, the two candidates who've emerged as frontrunners are highly qualified. One is Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. The other is Justice Leandra Kruger, who serves on the Supreme Court of California. Their credentials are impeccable. Jackson has served as a federal judge since 2013. She sits on the D.C. Circuit Court, highly prestigious post, which 3 of the 9 current Supreme Court justices once held. Kruger has argued a dozen cases before the Supreme Court and served in former President Obama's Justice Department, and both Jackson and Kruger clerked for Supreme Court justices coming out of law school, a job that's given only to the very best and brightest young lawyers. But by Biden promising a particular race and gender for his new Supreme Court justice, there's just no way around the perception that he's picking a person who fits the suit. Diversity on the Supreme Court is a good thing. I support efforts at creating a more diverse judiciary. Amy Coney Barrett was a highly qualified woman to sit on a court dominated by men. But last week on the show, I talked about how I believe the Biden administration is focused too much on the race, sexuality, ethnicity, and country of origin of judges in other appointments he's made to the federal judiciary, and not enough on their qualifications. I have to believe that the eventual nominee herself can't possibly like the fact that Biden made this political pledge. She surely would want to be seen as the most qualified nominee, not the most qualified black woman nominee. I think it undermines public faith, not just in the nominees, but the courts themselves. Joining us now is April Pryor. She is an attorney out of Chicago. April, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. So tell me, do you think I'm getting something wrong here?
I do. I think that the simple answer is it's time, because Black women have contributed so much, not just to the Democratic Party, not to just saving the last couple of elections, but also to the country as a whole. And if Black people make up about 14.2% of the nation, why don't we see ourselves reflected in the judiciary? So I think it's simply a matter of time, and whoever his candidate is, whoever the pick is, nominee, I should say, whoever Biden's nominee is, you already know that their credentials will be impeccable because they're being considered for the highest court. So I think it's an unnecessary argument to believe that because he pledged that someone of a particular race and gender would be placed in a role, that they are therefore unqualified.
Right. Well, look, let me be very clear about what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. I am not suggesting, therefore, the person's unqualified or that the person will be perceived as unqualified. What I'm saying is that by Biden promising this ahead of time, that the gender and the race of the person is predetermined, that inevitably that person, when that person gets on the bench, has to be seen as the Black woman choice and not just as the most qualified choice. And as I made it very clear, there are very highly qualified black women choices out there. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, to those very highly qualified black women choices, there is something that's kind of insulting, I think, about President Biden confining himself in this way, and thereby they are stuck with, as opposed to their achievements, some of which I just laid out, they're stuck with this sense of, I was picked within that pool. Your response?
My response would be, what is far more insulting is that we've been overlooked this long. And the fact that anytime any other nominee has been proposed, the assumption would be that that person was white and male. And there was never a question then saying, oh, because he's white and male, are we overlooking other qualified candidates who are indigenous? Are we overlooking other candidates who might be Black, who might be Latinx? No, that's never the case. It's always the assumption that because he has been nominated by the president, that person is qualified. And I don't think that's a valid argument to believe that simply because Biden said in advance that my pick will be Black and female, that she's not going to be the best pick. Just like he did the same thing with the vice presidential nominee, he said in advance that she would be Black and female, and then people were guessing which pool of women would he draw from, and the same arguments were made.
But you know, as an attorney, right, there's something different when it comes to the court than politics, right? In politics, that's the way we live. That's what politics is. We would hope that the court wouldn't have that same political, you can either call it stink or sensibility or whatever it is around it. And again, I am not saying that he should be in any way second-guessed for picking a black woman. I am saying, and therefore I'm not saying that people are going to say, oh, look at all these other people who were overlooked. What I'm saying is that he's done the undermining by making this pledge before, and now he's got to deliver on that. And it sounds to me like you don't view that as a concern. I think it's fair to say.
No, I don't. And I think that there's this assumption that because the courts in the United States should be fair and there should be no issues of race, but we know that that's not the case even in the lowest courts. I know that anytime I walk into a courtroom, it's going to be assumed that I am there to play any other role other than to be an attorney. I know that the road to becoming a Black female attorney is a very uphill battle. In fact, we are only 1.78% of the entire bar. So I am excited, and I do not apologize for being excited that Biden has said in advance that he is going to nominate a Black woman, because again, like I said at the very beginning, it is time.
Yeah. And if there, again, to give you a hypothetical, since there's never been an Asian American, a Pacific Islander, et cetera, if President Biden had come out and said, my next pick is going to be an AAPI representative, you would think that too is the way he should be pursuing this, as opposed to pausing, waiting till he gets the next one, and then picking someone, if he wants to, who's AAPI.
No, I don't have a problem with him announcing it in advance. I would be just as elated if it was an Asian American who was being nominated for the bench the next go round, because again, the judiciary should reflect the people that they represent. They should reflect the people that they serve. And that is simply not the case. So if there are groups that are not represented on the highest court of the land, that needs to be changed. And I commend Joe Biden for taking that step. And
I hear you on that point. I think that the area where we disagree is on the announcement ahead of time. And I think that does a disservice to the people who he's been picking. And I've said this about other federal judicial nominations that the Biden administration has pursued, that in their announcements, they focus much more on the sexuality, on the country of origin, on the race, on the gender, than they are on the qualifications. I hope that whenever this person gets nominated, that their qualifications become the focus of the administration, And I'm blaming them for the way they have been positioning this, not on the decision itself. You want to have a final word on that?
Well, yeah, the final word would be representation matters. And that's not just some catchy hashtag. It's a matter of, just like any time a jury is called, a judge says to that jury, you are to not leave your experience and your common sense at the door of the courthouse. You're to bring that in with you. It's no different for a jurist. And so if the jurists all look alike and all have a similar background, then that is going to be reflected in their decisions. And so I have no problem with Joe Biden saying in advance, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to appoint someone from a different background, and letting us know in advance that he has earmarked a spot for someone who is going to reflect a different experience.
Yeah, and I guess where we differ is I think that does them a disservice. But April Pryor, it's a good conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, the 3 other officers now on trial, accused of violating George Floyd's civil rights after Derek Chauvin's conviction. It may seem like a slam dunk for the prosecution. It is far from it, and few seem to want to talk about it. That's coming up. The state murder trial of Derek Chauvin and the killing of George Floyd was never really in doubt. At best, Chauvin might have gotten a hung jury or maybe a conviction on the lesser charge, but no serious legal analysts expected he'd be acquitted. The federal civil rights case against the other 3 former Minneapolis police officers who were with Chauvin is a totally different story, and few people are discussing this reality. J. Alexander King, Thomas Lane, and Tu Tao are charged with violating Floyd's civil rights by not providing him medical care, because as police officers, it was either their duty to do so. And Tao and King also face a count of failing to intervene to stop Chauvin from keeping his knee on Floyd's neck. Now, much of what the Department of Justice is doing here is sort of uncharted territory. That's because the feds have to prove that King, Lane, and Tao willfully deprived Floyd of his constitutional rights by not intervening, as Chauvin killed Floyd over the course of more than 9 minutes on a Minneapolis street. And that they knew not stepping in was wrong. That is a high standard to meet. So people should not be shocked if and when there is an acquittal, or more than one, or a hung jury. Remember, this is a federal case, and all 3 officers are set to also go on trial on state charges of aiding and abetting murder and manslaughter in June. Now, Lane, in particular, is arguing that he did try to intervene by calling an ambulance and twice suggesting rolling Floyd over onto his side. You can hear that on this body cam footage, which starts with George Floyd on the ground begging for help. King's argument right now seems to rest on the belief that he, like Lane, was a rookie, too afraid to stand up to a supervising officer. He's also blaming the Minneapolis Police Department for not providing enough training before sending him out on street patrol. As for Tao, a veteran cop who was Chauvin's partner, his lawyers described him as effectively a human traffic cone focused on keeping back bystanders. Joining me now is Mark Osler, a former federal prosecutor, currently a professor at the University of St. Thomas Law School right there in Minnesota. Professor, thank you for coming on the program. Appreciate it. You know, it is stunning to me that so few people are talking about how difficult a case this may be for prosecutors. Why do you think it will be so difficult?
Well, one thing is it's always difficult to prove a negative. And when we were talking about Derek Chauvin, we were talking about what he did, the knee on the neck. It was a very direct thing. Here we're talking about failure to act. It's an omission crime. And that's always going to be tougher, because one of the things they have to do is prove that they had a duty to act. And that's why we're hearing all the discussion about training, is trying to establish that there was a duty, that they were trained to step in, trained to provide the medical attention that wasn't given. But yeah, it's a tough row. to get there for the prosecution.
And do you think that Derek Chauvin could be called as a witness?
It's possible. We'll see if one of the defendants decides to do so. I mean, I can tell you that I think the government is worried that one of them may call Derek Chauvin. If you read the plea agreement that Derek Chauvin came to and contracted with the government, some of the language in there tries to cabin or limit what he might say relevant to the others. For example, here's from the plea agreement itself and the factual stipulation. The defendant heard Officer Lane twice ask whether Mr. Floyd should be rolled on his side. The defendant did not hear or observe Officer Lane press the point and did not hear or observe Officer Lane say or do anything else. So we see that there the government seems to be anticipating the very possibility that Derek Chauvin might testify.
And it sounds like you believe that sort of some of the officers have better odds than others. I mean, we sort of lump them all together as if like, oh, well, the other three, but each of them are going to have separate jury verdict forms. They're going to have different legal instructions depending on who they are. And you think one or two might have better arguments than others?
Absolutely. And it's clear to the people who observe this closely that Officer Lane has the best case. In fact, that's why he was charged in one count, but not the other. He's charged with failure to provide medical attention, but not failure to intervene. And that's probably because he's the officer who twice said, let's turn him over on his side. He's the officer that went with George Floyd in the ambulance. He's the officer that tried to perform CPR. And that's very different than the others. Now, at the other end of the spectrum is probably Officer Tao, because he was more experienced. He can't say, this was my first week on the job. And today in trial, we had testimony that we heard in the George Floyd or the Derek Chauvin case from Genevieve Hansen. It was an off-duty firefighter who tried to intervene and provide aid because she's trained as a first responder. And former Officer Tao turned her away and told her that if she really knew what she was doing, she'd stay out of it. That is a different.
Let me ask you real quick, why do you think that the prosecutors went forward with the federal civil rights case now? Why not wait until the state case went first?
I think it's because they didn't know when the state case would go. I think a lot of it's up to the judge, of course. They didn't, they're going fast, and the judge is pushing it fast. And it could be an agreement between the state and the government to do it this way, so that if the government gets a conviction, that may mean that they don't have to have the state case, especially given that the state went first with Derek Chauvin.
But as you point out, this will not be nearly as easy as many seem to believe. Professor Mark Osler, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Coming up, Fox News and MSNBC primetime and mornings are partisan. And for the most part, they make no bones about it. CNN, on the other hand, claims to be big J journalism, have the hat on all the time. And here's a shocker. They get down in the partisan mud just like their cable news counterparts. They just can't admit it. That's next. Time now for our Mediaite Moments, where we check in on the day's bias, buzz, and bull in the world of cable news and beyond. It is well established that each cable news network caters its coverage to an audience that's largely seeking that specific take, sort of a partisan feedback loop that has played a very big part in our divided political state. And while top-rated Fox News is clearly partisan across the board in their morning and primetime programming, in my view, it's critical that a host like Sean Hannity admits what they do.
I'm honest about my opinions. I am a conservative. I say I'm a registered conservative. I am a talk show host. I don't portray myself as a news person.
Now, viewers of MSNBC should also know exactly what they're going to get from their opinion hosts. It ranges from left-leaning to far left. But in some ways, CNN can be the most troubling because they claim to be objective. And while CNN, like Fox and MSNBC, have some terrific reporters, their morning and primetime shows aren't remotely objective. And as a result, they may be the most dishonest about what they're doing.
I seem to remember Glenn Youngkin campaigning in a fleece vest in Virginia. He was running as a different kind of Republican. I was told there was going to be a vest. not a Soviet-style police state across the Potomac from Washington.
Yeah, that's CNN's Jim Acosta last night, presumably a news anchor, snarking on the actions of newly elected Republican governor and comparing his executive actions to authoritarian dictators, which is a strong opinion. Look, I like Jim, but that's not objective news and journalism. And it's not just Jim Acosta. Here's his colleague, Brianna Keeler, who's also presumably a news anchor.
For the last several weeks, and years for that matter, many in the Republican establishment here in Washington fed and nurtured a monster that was growing in their midst.
Now, that is an opinion that she's entitled to have, but it's not news. These aren't isolated examples either. It happens all the time on CNN.
This is not a profile in courage from Mitch McConnell, more like a profile in calculation. Still more Churchillian than what we've seen from Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who recently groveled for forgiveness on Fox News.
Whether you agree with him or not isn't the point. But look, things might be changing. CNN will soon merge with Discovery Network, and executive John Malone had this to say about CNN's future.
I would like to see CNN evolve back to the kind of journalism that it started with, and actually have journalists, which would be unique and refreshing.
Actual journalism across the board would be a change. May not be a good idea for ratings, but at least it would mean they're doing what they say they're doing. Fox News in particular, and even MSNBC, are just more transparent than CNN. Now here, I like to call them as I see them. Sometimes I support one side, other times the other, but I'm an analyst. I'm an opinion host. I'm not a journalist. I don't pretend to have no opinions as journalists are supposed to do. I don't think it's that much to ask to provide you, the viewers, with that little bit of transparency. That's our wrap of the day's media bias, buzz, and bull. Coming up, Tom Brady and so many in the sports media feel sorry for former Buccaneer Antonio Brown based on mental health concerns. Brown saying it's not true. Now he's even threatening to sue for people who claim it. Okay, then maybe now we can finally stop feeling sorry for Antonio Brown. It's next. If we take Brown and his lawyer at his word about his mental health, then it seems to me that he's just a really bad guy, potentially even a dangerous guy. So when does the sports media and others finally accept that? We reached out to Antonio Brown and his attorney for both of them to come on the show, and they declined. But we are thrilled to have the perfect guest on this topic, Mike Florio. He is the host of Pro Football Talk on NBC's Peacock. He's not only one of the premier insiders in all of pro football, he's also a lawyer. Mike, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right, so am I getting something wrong here? Am I missing something that the inside the sports media folks get that I don't get?
This is both a very complicated and very simple situation, Dan. And like you, I'm a recovering lawyer, which I'm very proud to say. I got over the wall, and I rarely look back except in moments like this. I am always sensitive to the rights of players, and I think it becomes a greater challenge to be sensitive to the rights of anyone at a time when the person is engaging in unpopular conduct, activities, and statements. So I think there's an obligation to always be willing to step back and say, is there a chance that someone is taking advantage of this situation to paint him in a bad light, to harm and undermine his rights in some way? So I'm always on the lookout for that, because these people are very difficult. Situations like this are very challenging to get behind what's right and what's wrong. However, as you've pointed out very aptly, Antonio Brown continues to be his own worst enemy. And I'm concerned about whether or not Antonio Brown is getting the best possible legal advice from Sean Burstyn. There's a temptation when you're a lawyer who has a high-profile client to push it as far as you can, because it keeps your name in the news. It keeps you on the shows. It can advance your practice. We've seen that time and again. And the idea of a defamation lawsuit, would be the biggest mistake legally that Antonio Brown could make for a variety of reasons. And you know, we could spend a whole hour talking about all the reasons why he shouldn't pursue a defamation lawsuit.
But do you still take seriously the possibility that all of this should be attributed to mental illness? Because everyone from Brady to ESPN hosts, others, all were expressing empathy for a guy who typically, when I say typically, meaning who did the things he did, would be shunned, would be criticized. And instead, there's this sort of, oh, this poor guy, and that he and his legal team keep telling us, stop saying that.
Well, look, the individual who may be having a mental health crisis is the last one who should be in a position to diagnose whether or not he has a mental health crisis. And people who aren't professionals shouldn't be diagnosing it either. There are reasons why I think the Buccaneers were pushing the narrative. There was a concern, I believe, among the Buccaneers organization that this guy who supposedly had an ankle injury that caused him to tap out of the game was still healthy enough that he could go play for someone else, maybe someone that the Buccaneers would have encountered at some point in the postseason, like the Packers if both teams had advanced last round, or the Chiefs if the Buccaneers had made it to the Super Bowl. So I think there may have been some effort, maybe not so subtle, maybe a little clumsy, to paint him in a negative light, to make him unpalatable to other teams. So I think that was part of the motivation. And it was also along the lines of, it's not anything we did, it's about him. There's something wrong with him. I don't think it's a good strategy for Antonio Brown and his lawyer to be going on all these various shows and talking about whether he does or doesn't have a mental health condition. And Dan, my primary advice, if Antonio Brown was my client, my son, my nephew, my friend, my cousin, anyone that I had any relationship with, be keep your head low and your mouth shut, for one very important reason that we haven't discussed. He was suspended 3 weeks for using a false vaccination card back in July. There's a couple in New York that's getting prosecuted for using a fake vaccination card to get into a Bills game. He's potentially on the radar for the authorities. And all it takes is one prosecutor to exercise discretion in a way to go after him, and he's got a major problem. This right now is the best time for him to just go out of sight and quit talking, but he can't stop talking.
I think it's good advice. And Mike Florio, I'm seeing you in the background there with your book. I realized I forgot to promote your book. His new book, Playmakers, How the NFL Really Works and Doesn't, comes out on March the 15th. There you get to see the full graphic, not just it hiding in the background there. Mike Florio, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Great talking to you, Dan. Anytime, pal.
Coming up, are the Seven Dwarfs from Snow White offensive? Emmy-winning actor Peter Dinklage says yes, but where do we draw the line over what constitutes offensive characters in a fairy tale? That's next. Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs now under fire from a high-profile actor. Are lovable Doc grumpy, happy, bashful, sleepy, sneezy, and dopey no longer acceptable in our new world? Star actor Peter Dinklage has now called out Disney for including the characters in its plans for a live-action remake of the film, which will feature West Side Story actor Rachel Zegler, who is Latina in the title role. Dinklage, who has a type of dwarfism called achondroplasia, made those comments during Monday's episode of the WTF podcast with Mark Maron. Yesterday, Disney responded to Dinklage's harsh comments. Spokesperson told The Hollywood Reporter, quote, to avoid reinforcing stereotypes from the original animated film, we're taking a different approach with these 7 characters and have been consulting with members of the dwarfism community. I'll admit that I had never thought of it before, but the portrayal of 7 men living in a self-isolation in a cave might be troubling for a community that has been historically discriminated against, as people with dwarfism have been. But on the other hand, we're talking about a fairy tale. Animals can talk, they're magic mirrors and fairies. So while I am sympathetic to the cause and the comments, I wonder, where do we draw the line? I worry when we start taking fairy tales literally, that we head down a dangerous road. Beauty and the Beast denigrates someone based on looks. Ogres are often the villains in fairy tales. So will people with gigantism say that it's a disturbing portrayal for them? I just don't know. But joining me now to enlighten me is Michelle Krause, Public Relations Director for Little People for America. Michelle, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. So should I be worried about the future of fairy tales?
I don't think you should be worried, Dan. Thank you so much for having me. I think, this is a tale that is really antiquated. And when we're living at a time when communities and with dwarfism, communities with disabilities are being unevenly portrayed, I think, we have to take a stand and demand fair and accurate representation. And as you say, 7 men living in a cave singing hi ho, and being named different adjectives based on feelings is just, it couldn't be further from being accurate.
So what do you make of my point before that about these being sort of fairy tales, right? Things are made up. It's invented. These aren't real life, right? Where animals talk, etc. And so consequently, we should sort of let a fairy tale be a fairy tale and not be so literal. What do you make of that?
Again, I feel like if there was enough education, enough references of people with dwarfism in the mainstream community, I would say, great, that's a completely different reference point. It's a different story. It's not about a human experience. But to tell you the truth, the Seven Dwarfs is not magical. It's not a fairy tale. It is a fairy tale, but it's not like these characters have magical powers or mythical likeness. They are being portrayed as 7 men, just like you said, and that can be easily, especially by children, easily associated with the person with dwarfism. Oh, that person on the street has dwarfism. Are they one of the 7 dwarfs? And so we're not people that are only here for entertainment value. And we just, again, are asking for more balanced roles and portrayals where we are just people, who work, who have families, who have relationships, who have particular skills, not magical, not mythical.
And who advocate very eloquently for causes. Michelle Krause, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Straight ahead, officers are confronted by a carjacking and murder suspect pointing a gun at them. We're on scene with more of the stunning body cam footage up next. We're on scene with the Charleston, South Carolina Police Department showing the dangers that officers face every day. Starts with a 911 call after a carjacking.
This guy walked up behind me and put a gun to my head, and I had a $1 bill in my hand, and I had just played some numbers, the lotto, and my car keys, and he took my car keys, and he got in the car and he drove off.
The suspect, Montrez Simmons, was already wanted on a murder warrant and another carjacking. Days earlier, police found Simmons driving the stolen Toyota Avalon taken from the 911 caller.
The vehicle's taken off on us now. We are in pursuit. Give us a channel. Braked out. Felony stop. Please don't move! Let me see your hands! Let me see your hands! Put your hands up! Put your hands out the window! To the back of the car! To the back of the car!
Officers Sammy Stevens and Lindsey Mungeon Brown chased the suspect who crashed the stolen car. Simmons then got out of the car and pointed a gun at police. Officer Stevens fired a shot, hitting Simmons in the chest. The suspect fell on top of the gun.
Crawl to your left, keeping your hands extended out in front of you. I want you to shift to your left and move away from your firearm. You understand? Keep rolling. Keep rolling. Keep rolling. You all right, man? We're going to take care of you, okay?
Just let me die.
We're not going to let you die, all right, man?
Once the suspect rolled away from the gun, police gave him first aid until paramedics arrived. Simmons survived and was charged in the murder and carjackings he was wanted for. The gun recovered at the scene was found to be unloaded and without a magazine. As a convicted felon, Simmons was not allowed to carry a firearm. Neither officer was injured. The solicitor's office ruled police acted within the law during this incident. Joining me now is Sean Sticks Larkin, once again, retired Tulsa police lieutenant. All right, Sticks, police knew they were chasing a violent suspect, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You know, when there in South Carolina, they call it a BOLO, be on the lookout. Here in Tulsa, we refer to it as a COS, check for your own satisfaction. And it's basically when you have a crime like this, a violent crime, a carjacking, a shooting, an armed robbery, it's broadcast not just citywide, but other jurisdictions right around the other agencies all get to hear this suspect description. So officers are just keeping an eye out on their patrol, and 45 minutes later or so, these officers spot the suspect vehicle. They know this guy has committed a violent crime 45 minutes earlier with a gun. But what they don't know, they didn't know he was wanted for murder and another carjacking a few weeks earlier.
So the suspect was shot, and then he fell on top of the gun. I want to play that again.
I want you to shift to your left and move away from your firearm. You understand? Keep rolling. Keep rolling. Keep rolling. We're not going to let you die, all right, man? Mr. Simmons, we're going to take good care of you, okay, buddy?
No, let me die.
No. We're going to keep you alive, okay?
You know, listening to that, Sticks, I really appreciated the immediate difference in tone, right? Screaming, yelling, instructions. The minute they get what they need, it's help.
Yeah, absolutely. Compliance is a huge, huge deal for us. And I want to commend the officers. The officer, the driver of that car, he had about 6 years on the department when this happened. And one of the things that honestly makes me cringe at the end of any car chase is when the officers charge the vehicle to try to get the suspect in custody. This is why you should not do that. You should keep that distance, use that distance to your advantage and use verbal commands to the suspect. And obviously this one resulted in a deadly force type of incident. But you're spot on. They go from very forceful commands trying to tell this suspect what to do, shoot the suspect, get him in custody, and the whole tone changes completely. Immediately they get on the radio, ask for EMS, and they tell him, we're not going to let you die. And they start treating him for his injuries.
Yeah, an example of quick police action in the field. There was only about 12 seconds, I think, from the time officers got out of their car and the suspect pointed the gun, and then the officers opened fire there. So that's, again, a reminder. We talk about this a lot. Split-second decisions that have to be made.
Absolutely. Yeah, 12 seconds from the time the car stopped until that shot was fired. But when the suspect got out and the shot fired was about 2 seconds. So that fast.
Sean Larkin, as always, thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dan.
That does it for us tonight. As you probably tell, we had a few technical issues. That's why I got these things in my ear. We had a guest drop out at the last minute. And you know what? The show went on. So thank you to everyone here in Chicago. We made it happen. How about that? NewsNation Prime with Marnie Hughes starts right now. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.